Clara's regret arrived on a Tuesday, wrapped in tissue paper and nestled inside a cardboard box. It was a dress, sunshine yellow, just like the ones they used to sell at the little boutique on Main Street. The same boutique where Clara and I would while away countless afternoons, she in search of the perfect shade of lipstick, and I, mesmerized by the mannequins draped in colorful fabrics. This dress, however, wasn't meant for Clara. It was for me. I stared at the box for a long time, the cardboard suddenly feeling heavy in my hands. 6 years. It had been 6 years since my father's passing, 6 years since Clara, my stepmother, had deemed me unworthy of even a goodbye. And now this dress, this unexpected olive branch, arrived at my doorstep, stirring up the dust of old wounds. Clara had never been warm and fuzzy. Dad. Just thinking his name brought a familiar ache to my chest. He was the kind of man who could find joy in the simplest things. A sunny day, a good book, the crisp crunch of autumn leaves underfoot. He loved to laugh, his entire face lighting up with an infectious joy that could brighten even the gloomiest of days. Some of my fondest memories were made in the orchard behind our old farmhouse. Dad had planted those apple trees when I was just a little girl, nurturing them with the same love and care he poured into everything he did. The best apples are always the ones you have to climb for, he'd say with a wink, hoisting me onto his shoulders so I could reach the highest branches. Clara never understood our bond, the easy camaraderie we shared. She saw it as a threat, a barrier to the affection she so desperately craved from my father. The phone call came on a dreary Tuesday morning, the sky weeping with a relentless gray drizzle that mirrored the ache in my heart. The world outside seemed to mourn with me. It was Clara, her voice strained, almost unfamiliar, as she delivered the news that shattered my world. Dad was gone, a heart attack swift and silent, stealing him away in the dead of night. It felt surreal. I remember very little of what happened next. The world spun, a dizzying blur of grief and disbelief. My mind was a fog. I vaguely recall booking a flight, the frantic packing of a suitcase, my hands moving on autopilot, the hollow echo of the empty apartment as I locked the door behind me. All I wanted was to be home, to be enveloped in my father's familiar embrace, to hear his reassuring voice telling me that everything would be all right. His words always had a way of soothing my soul. But when I arrived at the house, breathless and heartbroken, it was Clara who greeted me at the door, her face a mask of grief, her eyes red-rimmed but dry. The weight of her sorrow was palpable. "He's gone," she said simply, her voice devoid of emotion. "The funeral is tomorrow. You are not welcome." The finality of her words hit me like a tidal wave. The funeral was a blur, a surreal and agonizing experience I watched from afar. I sat in my car, parked across the street from the church, my breath fogging up the windows as tears streamed down my face. I watched as mourners filed inside, their faces etched with sadness. I saw Clara draped in black, her face pale and composed, accepting condolences with a stoic grace that felt alien and cold. And then I saw it, the empty chair, Dad's chair, the one he always sat in, right next to Clara, his hand resting reassuringly on her arm. But today, the chair was empty, a stark reminder of the gaping hole ripped through my life. As the service ended and the mourners began to disperse, I started my car and drove away, the empty chair forever etched into my memory. The years that followed were a blur of grief and anger. I threw myself into my work, burying myself in deadlines and late nights at the office, anything to numb the pain that lingered like a constant shadow. My relationship with Clara remained non-existent. We spoke only once, a brief and stilted phone call on the anniversary of Dad's death. Friends and family who stayed in touch whispered about her regret, about the guilt that gnawed at her conscience. They said she had changed, that the once cold and aloof woman was now a shadow of her former self. I didn't want to hear it. Forgiveness felt like a foreign language, one I no longer had the vocabulary to speak. The yellow dress arrived on the 6th anniversary of Dad's passing. I had almost forgotten about our tradition, shopping for a new summer dress every year, a ritual we had shared since I was a teenager. Clara must have remembered. Tucked inside the box, along with the dress, was a photograph. It was a picture of Dad and me, taken on one of our many trips to the orchard. We were both smiling, our arms laden with apples, the sun casting a warm glow over our faces. On the back of the photograph, written in Clara's shaky handwriting, was a single line. "I owe you an apology. Meet me at the orchard tomorrow at dawn." My heart pounded in my chest. The orchard was bathed in the soft, ethereal glow of dawn when I arrived. The air was crisp, carrying the scent of dew-kissed grass and the sweet perfume of honeysuckle. I spotted Clara immediately, sitting on our old wooden swing, her shoulders slumped, her gaze fixed on the gnarled branches of the apple trees. She looked older, frailer than I remembered. The years had etched lines on her face, lines that spoke of regret and unspoken sorrow. As I approached, she stood up, her eyes meeting mine with a vulnerability I had never seen before. I don't know where to begin, she stammered, her voice barely a whisper. I know I hurt you deeply, and I can never take back what I did, what I said. She reached into her bag and pulled out a sealed envelope, her hand trembling slightly as she handed it to me. This is for you. It's from your father. My heart skipped a beat. The letter was dated a week before Dad died. It was a time when everything seemed to be falling apart, yet this letter held a piece of him that I had never known. It was written in his familiar handwriting, the words filled with the same warmth and love I remembered from my childhood. Each stroke of the pen seemed to carry his essence, his spirit. He wrote about his love for me, his pride in the woman I had become. His words painted a picture of a father who had always been silently cheering me on, even when I couldn't see him. He spoke of his hopes for my future, his dreams of walking me down the aisle, of one day holding his grandchildren in his arms. These were dreams he had never shared with me, dreams that now felt like a bittersweet memory. And then came the part that shattered my heart into a million pieces. It was a revelation that changed everything I thought I knew about my past. He wrote about Clara, about her insecurities, her fear of being replaced, of losing him to the memory of my mother. It was a side of her I had never understood, a vulnerability she had hidden well. He explained that he had asked her to promise him something he believed would protect me from further pain. It was a promise made out of love, but one that had unintended consequences. She promised to make sure you stayed away, sweetheart, he wrote. Those words echoed in my mind, bringing a mix of confusion and clarity. Not because I didn't want you there, but because I was afraid. Afraid of what my death might do to you. Afraid of the grief consuming you, breaking you. His fear was palpable, a father's desperate attempt to shield his child from pain. Afraid of what my death might do to you. Afraid of the grief consuming you, breaking you. He thought it would be kinder, less painful for me to mourn him from a distance. He thought it would be kinder, less painful for me to mourn him from a distance. It was a decision made with love, but one that left me feeling abandoned and confused for years. All these years, I had carried the burden of his absence, never realizing that it was love, not anger, that had fueled Clara's actions. This realization brought a sense of peace, a new understanding of the sacrifices made out of love. We talked for hours that day, the orchard bearing witness to our tears, our confessions, our hesitant steps towards forgiveness. Clara told me about Dad's last days, about his unwavering love for me, about his regret at not being able to say goodbye. She spoke of her own guilt, her remorse at keeping us apart, at denying us both the closure we deserved. He loved you so much, she said, her voice thick with emotion, and I let my own fears get in the way. I was so afraid of losing him, of being alone, that I couldn't see the pain I was causing. Forgiveness, I realized, was not a single act of absolution, but a long and winding road paved with understanding, empathy, and a willingness to let go of the past. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the orchard, I reached out and took Clara's hand. We were both broken, both scarred by the loss of the man who had been the center of our world. The yellow dress still hangs in my closet, a bittersweet reminder of the father I lost and the stepmother I am slowly getting to know. It's a relic of a time when life was simpler, yet more complicated in ways I didn't understand back then. It is a symbol of a bond broken and a promise of healing, of a future where the past no longer holds us captive. Each page of the photo album we turn is a step towards mending the rift, a journey through memories that once brought pain but now offers solace. Forgiving Clara didn't erase the pain of losing Dad, nor did it excuse her actions. It was a complex process, filled with moments of doubt and hesitation, but also small victories that made the effort worthwhile. But it did free me from the shackles of anger and resentment, allowing me to cherish his memory without the bitterness that had clouded my grief for so long. It was like stepping out of a dark room into the light, where I could finally breathe and remember him with love. In the years since our reunion in the orchard, Clara and I have forged a new kind of relationship, one built on honesty, respect, and a shared understanding of the man who brought us together. We've learned to communicate openly, to listen without judgment, and to support each other in ways we never thought possible. We talk often, sharing stories and memories of Dad, keeping his spirit alive in our hearts. These conversations have become a cherished ritual, a way to keep him close even though he's no longer with us. I still visit the orchard every year on Dad's birthday, a pilgrimage of remembrance and gratitude. It's a sacred space where I feel his presence, where the rustling leaves whisper the stories of our past. Sometimes Clara joins me and we stand together beneath the shade of the apple trees. In those moments, we find a quiet peace, a shared understanding that transcends words, and a bond that has been reforged through forgiveness and love. Forgiveness, I've learned, is not a straight line but a journey, a winding path with its share of twists and turns. It is a choice we make, not for the person who wronged us, but for ourselves. It is a letting go, a release from the chains of anger and resentment that bind us to the past. Clara may have made a mistake all those years ago, but she found the courage to own up to her actions, to seek forgiveness, and to honor my father's memory by bridging the gap she had created. And in doing so, she gave me the greatest gift of all, the gift of letting go, of finding peace, and of finally being able to remember my father with the love and joy he deserved. The orchard remains our sanctuary, a place where the past and present intertwine, where memories bloom like wildflowers, and where the echoes of laughter remind us that even in loss, there is always hope, healing, and the enduring power of love.